Cool. So the last time we spoke was at the end of last year. We were doing basically a year-end retro. So it's been a while, and it's fair to say that we've done quite a bit since then, specifically on call. So today marks 3 weeks to the day that we launched on call. So very general question: what have things been like since then, Pete? You were really close to that launch, so let's start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, 3 weeks to the day, minus an hour and a half, I think at this point, plus the hour where we were trying to figure out how to get Steven's video uploaded on hotel Wi-Fi. So things have calmed down a little bit since then. Obviously, launch day was kind of crazy. I think the main thing that has changed, I guess we started with a kind of, we're not done. We have loads of stuff to build. We kind of thought we knew what that was. I'd say like most of the things that we had on our list to build still feel pretty spot on. Like, we're relatively, we're pretty in tune with our customers. We know what, they're desperate for in on call. And a lot of that we are now, a good way into building. I think what's changed for us is like, now that we're public about it and now that we're telling everyone we're building this, we're hearing about all the things that the people we weren't talking to want, right? And so, we've built like 100 things over the last 3 weeks, probably more. Honestly, it's been about sort of 50, 60 features or sort of small tweaks made every week. But the list of things we haven't built has got even longer. And that's really awesome. That's what you want, right? When you launch a product, you don't want to kind of burn through your list and then be done. You want customers to make that list 3 times as long. And then it becomes a question of prioritization. So I think sort of, still a long, long way to go. We've got a huge amount out the door in the last 3 weeks, and we should talk about that in a bit. But yeah, the main change is, the roadmaps and the backlog are much longer than they were when we started, and that's a good thing.
Chris, you were in Paris last week for KubeCon. What was the reception like to the product with on call included?
Yeah, I think so. We've been to a fair few conferences now over the lifetime of this company, and we've never sort of struggled to draw a crowd. I think we've had like good booths and we've had good ways to demo the product. But Paris felt markedly different. I think different for two reasons. Number one, I spent a ton of time building what I thought were really cool demo stations. So we now have like a thing that you can put on the demo station that makes noise with our, a phone and a mobile app. And then I also built a bunch of like flashing lights that would go off and then buttons where someone could come up and push things. So I think like first of all, from a raw experience point of view, it felt much more engaging and much more fun to have people come up and have everything going off and sounds and sort of capturing some of that, that vibe of, I'm in the middle of an incident and everything's on fire kind of thing. But also I think just having conversations with people, feels markedly different now that we have the full picture all in one place, like having a platform where we do everything from, first alert firing and you're being woken up at whatever time in the night, right the way through to being able to generate debrief documents and arrange meetings and track all your follow-up work. I think the whole narrative of just talking to people, and you can see as you're talking to them now, they're like, okay, cool, well, this replaces this piece of software that currently does paging for me. And I also have that problem of like the home built tool that we have in Slack. And I don't have anything that does any of this post incident stuff. And so I don't know, it felt markedly different, much better, much easier and more cohesive as a kind of like narrative. So yeah, super excited to do a bunch more. And we're at, I think, millions of conferences this year. So yeah, excited to take the product out on the road. And as Pete said, like it's only getting stronger. So every conference is like more things we can show and more acceleration away from where, I guess a kind of stagnant on call and paging market has been for a long while.
So, speaking of changes, Pete, let's imagine a situation where someone opened the on call app on launch day, but they didn't do so again until next week. What are some notable changes that you think they will see at that point?
Good question. So I think the first thing is like congratulations on going 3 weeks with presumably no incidents. I think that's something to applaud. And when you open the app, I think you'll be met with a bunch of new and exciting things. So the first is the team have been hammering through new integrations. So we've launched, I think, 8 integrations in approximately 6 days. We can get these built really, really quickly. And if you're looking at us and thinking, oh, unfortunately, you don't integrate with whoever your provider is, like, the thing I'd say is I think the tightest we've ever shipped one, I think it took like 22 minutes from request to production. So we really can crank these out super, super fast, and we'll continue doing so. We've added Honeycomb, Pingdom, Status Cake. We've added emails and alert source now as well. So, those are coming thick and fast. We're trying to add a bunch of delight features as well. So things like syncing Slack groups with your on-call schedule. These are things that myself and others in the past have built little scripts and hacky apps to work around. And it's just kind of like obvious to us that your on-call provider should be building this kind of stuff for you. Like if you have to build tools or scripts or widgets that work around shortcomings in your provider, what is your provider doing, right? And so we never want our customers to have to do that, right? We want to be the ones that are building them the tools that they need. So things like that have gone down really, really well with customers. We had about 6 groups inside Instant IO set up within the first sort of 2 hours, all the way from support schedules to product manager responsible for triaging feedback, all sorts of cool stuff. So recommend you go take a look at that. And then sort of, without going into like a long laundry list, I think that the main thing that I'd call out is, we've shipped a huge number of smaller pieces of polish. And so it's kind of, I guess it's difficult to pinpoint, some of the bigger changes there. But if you'd opened the app and you'd played with the product previously, we've probably addressed about like 100 small bits and pieces where it wasn't like egregiously broken, but people kind of used it for the first time and said, hey, I have this idea or I have this feedback. And the team have tried to turn those around really, really fast. So I guess it kind of, whatever the opposite of 1,000 cuts is, we've kind of done, 1,000 little sparkles in the product. I think it will feel much neater, cleaner, easier to use. Certainly feels that way for me.
Talking of integrations, Pete, you just reminded me of during like the build out of On-Call where we were working with a customer who was like, I really, really want to be able to integrate natively with Cloudflare. And so Megan, the PM, is like, right, team, we need to build Cloudflare as a integration here. And the team like hustles to get it done, deliver it. And they're like, I mean, this is great, but what I wanted was CloudWatch. And so it's like, sort of good, good job. They're cheap to build. Yeah,
the Cloudflare integration was an accident, but was built really quickly. And then, in fairness, the CloudWatch integration came extremely fast after that. So, 2 for the price of 1 if you look at it with glass half full.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, I think it really speaks to our ability and willingness to just like step up and like deliver things when people ask for them in a really tight window. So whether it was Cloudflare, CloudWatch, now we've got both of them, I guess, which is great. But obviously, we're going to speak quite a bit about the product throughout this conversation. But I did want to make sure that we touched on just like the company as a whole and just the culture that we've continued to build. So I want to take a step back and ask, like, we've grown significantly over the past few weeks, months, years. In the early days, did you guys ever imagine that we would be growing this much, this quickly? Stephen, I think you can speak to this.
Yeah, so I guess for history's sake, like we started this as 3 co-founders on the side of full-time jobs. And I think at the start, we weren't really exactly sure what we wanted the company to be. I think Pete had visions of like living in a van with his wife and kind of traveling around and working 3 days a week. Not sure what Chris wanted to do, but like I don't think we were sort of all totally certain that we wanted to go like the venture-backed company route, because there is essentially like there's different ways of building companies, and the way that you finance your company, I think, kind of determines what that company can be. The reason that we got conviction that we wanted to kind of go big with this one is that it's such a ubiquitous problem. Like, if you define our company as helping people solve technology-related incidents, well, like over time, the percentage of companies that run software in production is basically 100%, and the likelihood of that software going wrong is essentially 100%. So it feels like we wanted to build something that kind of big enough that would be able to sort of deal with the size of the problem that we're trying to solve. As it comes to sort of your question directly, I think the hard thing, and like we'll talk about this in the next question a bit, but it's kind of hard to know how big your company will be because there's so much ambiguity in growing the company. It's like we could be exactly the same size as we are this time next year, 20 people bigger or a couple of 100 people bigger. And it really all depends on like how well we execute, how well the market responds to what we're building, So it's kind of, you just get comfortable dealing with like the ambiguity of, hey, I don't actually really know how much like office space to take out because it can change so infrequently, and you're basically just doing like the best you can with the information you have. Um, I would sort of describe the journey so far as like ups and downs. Like the way that we refer to it as founders is sort of sine waves. So like, you know, constantly going up and down. And the beauty of having multiple co-founders is that you can kind of offset each other's sine waves. So when Chris is having a bad day, Pete's probably having a great one, and I'm probably somewhere in the middle. And I think there are lots of ups and downs when starting a company, and you can very quickly go from this thing is totally going to work to like this thing is hopeless and shut the whole thing down in the space of like a few hours. And it's often not quite as extreme as that, but it is very it's not it's yeah, I would probably describe it like a swan. It can appear sort of graceful and like everything is going well on the outside, but I think even in the best and most well-performing companies, of which we hope to be one day, I think on the inside it's always a little bit of a mess. So yeah, it's been the growth has been, I don't know if I would say fun. I would say it's a bit like running. You don't necessarily enjoy it whilst you're doing it, but it has been rewarding to look back as we grew and be like, this has been cool, this has been amazing. And yeah, on call for me was like one of those points where we got to stop, look back, and be really just be really proud of what we've managed to achieve as it grew from like 3 people in a kitchen to about 100-ish across a couple of continents.
Yeah. And I don't want this to get very cheesy, but I think it's important to touch on the relationship the 3 of you guys have. How, like, obviously all 3 of you guys are very close. How important has that been to help you guys get through these like ups and downs? Because I can imagine if you all hated each other, it would have been significantly harder to get through these ebbs and flows. But how crucial has the relationship that the three of you have been towards like getting you through these moments?
I guess like talking to other founders, I think every founder, whether you have co-founders or not, needs like support network. I think we're just incredibly fortunate that we have like support network in WhatsApp, usually at the end of phones most days, and that aside from like talking about the work, we also like talk about our lives and we talk about challenges all over the place. And yeah, I think it is like everything we've spoken about this in the past. I think there's like many reasons why the 3 of us wouldn't have got on as well, or like there was no sort of really good reason why we should get on, maybe is the way to do it. In that we started this company when we barely knew each other, and things have just been quite lucky since. But yeah, I think like testament to like how we get on. Like last night, I said goodnight to my wife at about 10 p.m. and then went downstairs and ended up on a call with these two chaps for 2 hours until like gone midnight. And that was just like catching up on a bunch of stuff and, shooting the breeze, that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's, I think we're lucky. It works well. And it's a big help having this sort of within the company.
Yeah, for sure. Well, moving on, I did hear a rumor that we're moving to a new London office. And I think it's really weird that this comes right after we moved to a new office in New York. So obviously, we're moving away from incident management and turning into a real estate company. Stephen, please tell me that that is the right read.
Yep, it's the only logical conclusion. I since we started the company, we have been a little bit like against the grain in preferring to build a lot of our company as sort of an in-person culture. And the nice thing about going against the grain is that, well, it means that sort of what you want to do is probably underpriced or like or misrepresented. And there are some great deals to be had in real estate space in Manhattan, same as in London. I think if people are at all interested in how this stuff gets priced, in general, the way that they finance these buildings is that they don't really care how long they have to keep them vacant. They just care that they can charge a certain amount price per square foot. So if you're going to like the real market to get the price, you would think that stuff would be cheaper than it is. it isn't, because they don't care for keeping it sort of open. The way that you get the deals is you go to the companies that have gone remote and don't want their offices anymore and are happy to sort of hand it off at like not quite any price, but a great deal. That usually means taking like a couple of year leases. So we've done that in New York. I think we are not doing that in London, but maybe it's slightly different. And yeah, kind of referring back to the previous thing, it's like, well, how much space do you need? Well, how many people will you hire? Well, how successful will you be? All of these things are very hard to answer. So we have just like hedged and taken, I think, like conservative bets in that, like, we'd rather have smaller offices with people more packed in than some kind of like, you know, Bruce Wayne style palace where everyone gets their own wing of the office. But yeah, we are sort of working through the details of that at the moment.
Yeah. Leaving enough room for obviously like the big corner office is a must, right?
Draped in rich mahogany. Yeah. Of course.
Leather-bound books, exactly. Yeah.
Whenever my wife comes to the office, she's like, "You don't have your own office?" It's not how we do things here.
Man of the people.
It's terrible.
Exactly. So he's so down to earth. That's what we all say, isn't it?
Yeah. He's human like you and I, Pete. Sometimes,
with the fame, really. You might think they're different, but
I hold my breath and I work. I work in the same space as everyone else.
Well, shifting back to the product a bit. So again, like over the last quarter in particular, we've really accelerated towards this grand vision of being the single place you turn to when things go wrong. And basically an end-to-end platform. On-call was obviously the final piece of this puzzle, and that was from the inception of this company. I know that you guys have mentioned that that's always been the goal. But I guess my question is, how are we making sure that all of the products that we're shipping feel cohesive and that they actually work together, as opposed to feeling like very disparate very disparate features that are sort of here, there, and everywhere, but don't necessarily connect?
Yes. If you were on the inside of our company, you would hear like a few phrases get thrown around a lot. So like one is cohesion. The second is multiplicative product. So these are like internal memes that like everyone kind of knows what we mean, but I don't know if the outside world does. I think what we mean there is like with cohesion, it should feel like everything should feel like a natural extension of each other. And it should not feel like I'm kind of like there's this idea of Conway's law, which is where organizations end up shipping the org chart and you just see like very vast differences. Things don't connect with each other. And this can happen honestly just through like companies acquiring other companies. You don't spend the time like gluing the thing together to make it cohesive. We have addressed this problem as kind of viewing it as like one long journey from like getting woken up to dealing with a problem, to actually responding to that, to communicating with your customers, and to learning about it afterwards. So you can kind of think of them as multiple products. I think of them as like, capabilities and extensions of each other, but they're not clearly addressing different problems. They're just part of the same life cycle. In terms of how we make sure that happens and works well, we think of like, we split what we have built into like two layers. So first is like this kind of capabilities, products, surfaces. These would be things like on-call, status pages, but it would also be things like Slack. That is then powered by like a lower level like platform. And think of it a little bit like an iceberg in that workflows powers, which is our kind of if this then that style capability for automating work. That powers parts of response, sure, because you want to automate some part of your incident response, but it also powers part of on-call as well. And it can power updates to your status page. And all of these things are like, if you are building a new product inside Incident, you should get a lot of capabilities for free. And the way that we ensure that cohesion is that like we inject that into each different part. The other thing worth calling out, and it's just like cute, but I think you might miss it, is that we have this concept of expressions in the product, which is allowing you to kind of map to do like if else, if this then that style statements, but being able to like work things out like, who you should escalate to for a particular issue, or just generally like calculating little bits of logic. That goes through the entire product, at multiple different layers. And it's just a thing that you can plug in very easily if we were to add a new capability. So yeah, it's been it sort of hasn't been accidental. Hasn't been accidental. It is not accidental. That was it. Which is exactly the positive view. We have thought a lot about how to do this, and then it means that as and when we build new services and new products, it just gets done more quickly in future.
Yeah. I think communication plays a pretty significant role in all of this, especially as it relates to like how we're delivering on this story of Incident.io being the single place you turn to when things go wrong. Chris, you've had on your marketing hat for a little bit now, so I think you can answer this question. What are we doing to make sure that we're continuing to share this vision as opposed to just handing features off to customers and just running away?
Yes, it's a very good question and actually a really hard problem. And I think it's broader than probably just marketing as well. This is essentially like, if you look at this company, one of the things that I think we do exceptionally well, without sort of sounding too sort of backslappy, is that we ship things incredibly fast, which means, features that we have ideas about, we're shipping out into the world at great speed. When people come to us with like feature requests themselves or issues they bumped into, whatever else, we're shipping those at speed. And we do this thing. So Pete's incredibly disciplined about it inside of his team, which is we ship every single week of the year without fail, like 52 times a year, a change log, which is like, here is all of the stuff that has changed about our product in the last week. And if you you look at that and you can go, the upside of that is like, hey, customers are getting so much value. Like they sign up and like for 52 weeks of the year, they're getting just like new stuff, new capabilities, which is ultimately like a case for why you should buy software and not build it yourself. That's a separate discussion. But the downside of that is really, really hard to stay. I try to avoid swearing. Really hard to stay up to date with all of that. It's like drinking from a fire hose, right? And so, as much as we might like to think this is the case, there are very few people who, are customers who their sole reason to exist is to run incidents. They have jobs to do. They have other competing priorities. They have, they're trying to change how they do their platforms and ship their own products and all that kind of stuff. And we are like a necessary and useful and helpful like ally when stuff goes wrong. But like staying on top of all of the feature developments across, a platform like ours isn't their priority. And so we do have to work hard to kind of pick out the sort of the signal from the noise. And I think there's a few ways we do that. One of them, as you say, is marketing, right? It's like, how do we talk about what it is we're doing beyond the level of features? So sort of helping like articulate what problems people, are having in ways that they might not be able to sort of recognize themselves, and then motivating and selling the solution that we have and how that then maps down into features. And so that's one way. But I think like broadly, the way that we do this most successfully with customers is through like customer success. So this is, you sign up for Incident.io, you do not buy a product that we then walk away and we're like, have fun, we'll see you in a year for renewal. We work really closely with folks. And so that looks like quite high touch during onboarding. The product is not so complex that it needs that, but it's something where, like, honestly, it's a bit like self-serving in that if we do a great job of onboarding people, they have a happier time with the product, we get more feedback, we have great relationships, and then they stick around for a long time. And so yeah, I think this is like a constant struggle, and the job of like our customer success managers is to ultimately understand what pains the customers have and figure out which of the features that we're shipping are the ones that are most relevant to put in front of them, and being comfortable with the fact that there's a bunch that they won't put in front of customers because there's just not enough hours in the day, basically. But yeah, I think it's going okay. I do think sometimes we ship features and like the adoption sort of lags a little bit. So there's probably work to be done here. But I think generally things are feeling pretty good there.
Speaking of shipping features, Pete, this question is for you. When deciding, like, how do we decide what to ship versus what to shelf? Like, we have a lot of people on the team now. Everybody's very capable, very smart. If we wanted to, we could do everything. But obviously that would come with some sacrifices. So again, like, how do we approach this decision of what to actually build versus what to put on a roadmap for a later date?
Hang on, can we do everything? Is that an option, Pete?
Yeah, we can do everything.
Inspirational, Luis. With our team, we could
Yeah,
anything.
we can do everything.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you've seen one of those American game shows with the massive dartboard, if you imagine you just get post-its, everyone writes down their ideas, and then me and Stephen and Chris stand there and we throw darts, and then we pick essentially the first 10 things. That's where it all comes from. Very traditional product management prioritization methodology. No, in all seriousness, so there's I think there's really, really complicated ways to do this. And there's a lot of you can read a lot of books and you can, there's a lot of sort of, I guess, like approaches that get touted online. I think, honestly, our prioritization principles are very, very simple, which is, we're a business. We need to make money. We are very product-minded people and we want to delight our customers. And so anything that sits at the intersection of those Venn diagrams is kind of where you start, right? So it's kind of what are customers asking for and what will customers pay for? And you kind of need to solve for both of those. If you just build the things that people say they want, but they won't pay for, congratulations, you built a beautiful product that will eventually die. And if you only build the things that people pay you money for, but they don't really love, like your products and company lifespan is going to be short-lived because someone else is going to build something they love more. And I think, if you want examples of that, we have lots of competition who I think are learning that lesson right now. I think, ultimately, like the things we're chasing are, just that as, dollars and customer love. And I think, the actual tricky balance there is mostly around the size of investment and the size of thing you build. So, it's like we've got some huge investments we want to make, like On-Call, for example, which scores very highly on both of those axes. It's like customers desperately want it. They love it. They're willing to, hand over cash for that in a meaningful way. And that's a great exchange of value. There's loads of tiny things that they really want as well. And so trying to figure out how do we achieve these really big swings as a company whilst not taking our eye off the ball for the really small stuff. That's the tricky bit. And, we have a few ways that we do that. And I won't go into tons of detail here, maybe one for another podcast, but I think the key thing to drive home is that we care about both. And I think there's a lot of companies where all they do is big shiny project after big shiny project, and the edges get rougher and rougher, and it doesn't feel so smooth anymore, and things don't feel quite as cohesive. And we don't want to do that. And there are other companies where they polish to the maximum and all their edges are perfectly smooth, but fundamentally it just doesn't feel like they're hitting the core value that you're looking for as a customer. And for us, it's about balancing both of those. And so in general, if you're looking at a roadmap, which we are doing right now, it's very timely. The thing we're looking for is do we have both, right? Are there some ambitious swings that we're taking on, things we can build next and doing a bit of strategic investment? And are there lots of exciting tactical things where, it's going to make some customers really, really happy as well? So a bit of balance across two of those, but the underlying thing is, I expect on the end of every project for there to be either a customer banging their fists on the table, delighted that we've shipped it, or, someone is willing to pay us to kind of deliver that value for them. Because at the end of the day, we're a very product centric organization, but we're also a business. Right now, I think we're balancing that well.
Yeah. Earlier, we talked about, turning Incident.io into the single place you turn to when things go wrong. And like I said, On-Call was the final piece of that puzzle. It accounts for or takes care of that sort of pre-incident workflow. What are some of the things that we've shipped over the last few months that have improved how responders operate during incidents and after incidents?
Yeah, I think it would be really easy to look at the last month of the company and sort of assume that it's been everyone all hands on deck on On-Call. Actually, obviously On-Call has been a really, really important new sort of product that we've launched, but it's only a very small part of what the team's working on. And obviously as a company, we want to shout really loudly about it, but if you go look at our change log, the majority of what we're shipping is actually, not been On-Call, right? It's all the existing parts of the product or existing products that our customers love. And so, we haven't been hanging around on that either. And I think if you look back to, maybe if we just take the last 3 months, we don't really work super formally to quarters outside of commercial. But, if we just take last quarter as an example, in January, we shipped a ton of new AI features. That's very hand wavy, but essentially you can now sort of query your incident data using natural language, and we'll return with graphs and answers. Think ChatGPT for every incident you've ever had. That's pretty awesome. We can automatically find related incidents. We can automatically summarize your incidents, propose updates, all the things that you would expect if, I said we're doing AI for incident management. So that all landed in January. We've overhauled the post-incident process a little bit. There's still a lot more we can do here, but we've centralized all of the sort of key things or key tasks and activities that you perform when you wrap up an incident into one place. They were a bit distributed. And, when I talk about the small things and the polishing that we want to do to make a good product feel great, these are the things where it's like, you need to go back and you need to revisit what you did and look for those rough edges actively with your customers, and then, sort of aggregate that and fix them. So we've done some of that. Much smoother now, much easier to manage all of your post-incident tasks all in one place. We shipped some really cool experimental stuff. So, we have this amazing status page product. We have now this amazing on-call product. And, Stephen was talking about it earlier, but, multiplicative products is something that we really care about and I really look for. And it's kind of, if you take any two parts of our product, I'm always curious, how could these play nice together? And so now it's like, well, we have all of the control over your status page and we receive all of that traffic. If you get a massive spike and you don't have an ongoing incident, do you want us to just page you? That's really cool, right? So that's the thing that we shipped. Really, seeing that work for the first few times, you're just like, it's sort of a cool idea. It's even cooler in practice, where you can literally see, we knew, an hour before, in many cases, a customer had an incident, that they were having an incident, and now they know an hour before they would previously have known. That's awesome. And then a ton of other smaller things as well. Our catalog is a foundation for a huge amount of our product. You can bring all of the entities and information and resources in your organization all into Instant IO. You can use that in your workflows, in your automation, things like page my CSMs when their customer has an incident that is of a severity more than minor, for example. We can do all of that, but it's always felt a little bit like you had to sort of connect all the different user accounts together. So my Salesforce user and my PagerDuty user, or my Instant IO on-call user in the new world, these are all me, but they weren't really sort of all joined together. You had to do that yourself. Now we do that for you. The concept of you in the product across 9 different platforms now all lives within Instant IO. And so we can easily go, when Chris in Slack does something, I would like to pop a message on Chris in Salesforce. And that stuff is really, really easy. And then, I don't know, there's if you look at the changelog, honestly, I went and counted, there's probably about 400 to 600 things in there that I could go through. So I'm very much cherry picking. I think one of the things that we use, maybe selfishly, that I found really, really nice is pausing incidents. Just as one quality of life thing we've wanted to do for ages. It's it messes with your metrics if you have incidents that live for a really long time when nothing's actually happening. And now we can explicitly pause them. You can do, the natural things that you always do, which is cool, we're going to pause this for tonight. We're going to pick it up in the morning. That is now explicitly modeled in our platform. And, that leads to much higher quality metrics as well. So there's kind of this virtuous cycle of, bits of the product making other bits of the product much more effective. I'll stop because I could talk about this for hours, but that's just I guess.
I think you did talk about it for hours, Pete.
5%.
Well, yeah, obviously we've released a bunch of really exciting stuff, but I wanted to end on asking each of you, what are you excited about?
I think where we are now with the product, I think we have some incredible places that we can deliver value to customers. So I think Pete touched on this, but the fact that we know all of the alerts that come in to your organization, and most organizations have a lot of alerts that you configure, and we know what you do with those alerts, and we know how often those alerts coalesce into one group that goes into an incident, and we know how often those alerts are false alarms, and we know all of that. This is just phenomenal value that I think we can give back to people, which is just really, really powerful insights. Imagine an alert fires, my phone goes off, and I open it up bleary-eyed at 2 a.m. and I'm like, okay, cool, this alert's fired, and it goes, last time this happened, here were the 5 bullet points of roughly what happened in the incident. And I'd be like, oh my God, that's amazing. I have a head start on thinking what this is going to be like. And so that is just a huge value add, I think, to organizations who very commonly are struggling with alert fatigue, overwhelming amounts of signal, and struggling to cut through that to get to the noise. So yeah, that's a product one for me.
I'll go next so I can beat Pete and make sure he doesn't steal mine. I'm excited to see the effects of on-call adoption across our customer base. So it's been 3 weeks and almost exactly now until we released it. And we've seen quite a lot of people move over already. Can't give specific numbers, but honestly much higher than I had initially expected. For larger companies, they are doing, as they should, sort of more due diligence on this. But like we are in active conversations with lots of our current customers, and I'm excited to see them adopt the product more widely. So yeah, it generally takes time for like new products to be successful. And I think, we are just like waiting a little bit at this point, but it's been a lot more than we have. It's been a lot more than we've seen, and I'd love to roll forward 3 months and just figure out sort of how much further along we would be. But excited to see all the progress we've made over the past few weeks.
Nice. In an inversion of what you were worried about, you've stolen my thing. So I will pick something else. But yeah, very excited about sort of reflecting on On-Call in 3 months' time post-launch. I think, if I was going to pick on some like product things specifically, I think I'm really excited for some of the features that we're going to be building. I won't go into detail now because we're just trying to finalize those roadmaps, and I don't want to get in trouble with my product managers. But several things that we're building specifically with like larger customers with more complex needs in mind. I think, these are the folks that I guess really stretch the edges of your product. They have the most interesting incidents, honestly, a lot of the time. They have the most complex organizations. And I think there's a huge amount of value we can add there. And honestly, it's been quite fun, particularly working with them, given my background is like, with Stephen and Chris at Monzo and then at GoCardless before that, it's like starting to see some of the patterns emerging with these larger customers that I remember from my time running, horrendous, massive incidents. So really excited to build out some new things for those folks. And then like from a company perspective, I think we've gone through a period of like really rapid team growth. And that's been happening alongside all of the things we've been doing in the product, but I'm really excited to see, I guess, like the fruits of that. I think it always takes time for people to onboard and settle in and sort of feel like productive and at home, and I kind of see the seeds of that starting to come home now, which is really exciting, and folks are like hitting their stride in many places, and that's awesome to see. So I'm kind of keen to see what happens with fully ramped team versus constantly onboarding team. We got some this week as well, which is also really exciting.
You say the phrase "the seeds are starting to come home"?
Yeah, I make that my metaphor.
The seeds have gone out, but now they need to come home again. It's
Look, it's my metaphor, and I'll mix it however I like. Thank you very much.
It was like it reminded me of the sort of thing the brain does where you can just rearrange letters in a word and you can still approximately read at the same speed. It's like, I know what you meant, Pete, but I don't think I'll be able to explain it.
The other one, my brain then goes like the cows come home to roost, which is also not right. It's like chickens home through. Anyway,
you've planted your cows, Pete. Your cows are now growing. It's
my cows are bearing fruit. My favorite one earlier that you did, Stephen, that I didn't want to call out because I didn't want to interrupt flow, was you were like, a business is much like a swan. On the outside, very beautiful. On the inside, a total mess. And I was like, I think you mean like above the water, green, and below the water, frantically paddling. Much like swans, we are beautiful on the outside and messy on the inside.
You're absolutely right.
I'm going to stop recording now.